we're showing kind of Ghost, a Survivor, 1957, late 57, early 58 Gretsch White Falcon. Wow, how cool. You know, Gretsch has always done it a little bit differently. While all the companies were kind of chasing utility and trying to, do the status quo, Gretsch always kind of chased the dream, especially with the Falcon. Big, bold bodies, gold hardware, Art Deco excess with a huge bigs, everything overstated, a little bit of Vegas, a little bit of Cadillac, a little bit of rockabilly, a lot of punk rock, and a lot of swagger. This guitar, it wasn't for the working band, this was for the headliner. The future arrived in 1958 with this baby. You know, Gretsch was kind of figuring it out in real time. The Falcon, it wasn't designed to compete with other guitars. It was sitting at the top of the food chain. When this guitar was brand new in 1957, 1958, it listed for about $700 US, which doesn't sound like a lot of money until you adjust it for today's dollars and inflation. That's about $7,000 new. And, you know, back then, a lot of people couldn't afford a guitar like that, and they just didn't make that many of them, which makes this one really cool and special. In 57, Gretsch, they believed to produce about 300 Falcons. They were all handmade in a couple of different batches. You know, in 58, it's believed that they did about 500 to 600 of them. Still, very small, all handmade numbers. Only a fraction of those Falcons exist today. In fact, it's estimated that this model of guitar, the late 57, early 58, there's probably about 40 of them in the world left. So this particular Falcon came from late 57, early 58. And it's kind of one of the most fascinating moments in Gretsch history. You know, the Falcon was born in 1954 as the Cadillac of guitars, and definitely the flagship of the Gretsch line. The 57 was a bit of a transition. Gretsch was evolving. They designed this thing to be a showstopper, but they thought, you know, how do we make it better? And, you know, one of the things that kind of is really cool about this particular 57, 58 is it shares a lot of the old characteristics. The single toggle, the humpback inlay, with the new, cooler technology that Gretsch refined, like the Filtertrons. These are really cool. In fact, these are arguably one of the first sets that Gretsch made, because this is on a 57 body, but it's got 58 Filtertrons. So that's kind of cool. Here's the part that kind of makes vintage guys like myself really kind of stand up in this guitar. This batch of guitars was the 263 batch. This was a very rare batch in transition, and one of the coolest guitars that were coming out of this batch was a guitar owned by David Gilmour. Now in 2019, David sold his guitar, his Gretsch, at auction for $140,000 with the exact same accoutrements and trimmings as this guitar. The early body, the single toggle, the modern Filtertrons, the humpback inlays. Collectors, players, and rockabilly enthusiasts around the world agree that that combination of Gretsch is among the rarest and most sought after Falcons. Casper, this piece, was just basically a couple of guitars away from the David Gilmour guitar. Same batch, late 1957 run, very special. It combined kind of the best of both worlds. the single master tone toggle. The last year Gretsch ever used it. A lot of people like it. The mud switch is a little bit cumbersome. You know, guys like Brian Sexer just deactivate it completely and take it out and just use one Les Paul type toggle. Big, deep body, maximum air, maximum drama. The original Falcon aesthetic, the 54 thick body, unapologetically bold. Then the future arrives. Early Filtertron pickups. Yes, these are prototype era Filtertrons. Quite possibly some of the first Filtertron pickups that had ever been made. Really, really cool. Casper, it's a blueprint. Very few guitars are represented in this way, a moment in transition clearly. Casper, it captures the end of the Falcon era, the original Falcon era, and the birth of the Filtertrons, one of the smallest production windows Gretsch ever made. These are maybe a few of these, maybe a dozen of these guitars with these specs left. Gilmour sold at Christie's for $140,000. This is basically a couple guitars away, made on the same day, on the same bench, by the same builders. And this one and David's survived. You don't find them like this. And not only did it survive, check out the patina.